I have absolutely no idea what it is about Alec Baldwin that makes him feel like he needs to keep getting himself in deeper and deeper shit, but he just does not get a clue with any of this stuff, it seems. Remember, he was posting on Instagram about how he had podcast episode coming out with a child's book author, like just a few days after the shooting happened. Real bizarre stuff. But he in so many ways is feeling so tone deaf. If you're joining and you're watching right now, did you see this Alec Baldwin interview that he did on ABC? Did you see any of the clips? What's your impression about what's going on with this? Where are you landing on when it all first happened? It made a lot of sense to see and understand that there was an accident going on here. And I do still think that to a large degree, there's an accident going on here. If I had to guess, and again, through all this, I'm not a lawyer. If I had to guess, I would not say that anything here was intentional, at least on his part, I don't think. But he is coming across as so arrogant, and he is seemingly so unable to accept any level of responsibility. I'm shocked with the amount of statements that he is making right now. There's a line in Succession wherever Logan Roy said, "Remember that everything is always shifting, constantly. Everything is constantly shifting." And I feel like that is what is going on with this story. Because again, I'm going to say I don't think that there was an accident, but even if it's an accident, I think it was an accident. Even if there's an accident, that does not absolve people of responsibility. And he is constantly acting like he is absolved of all responsibility. And that keeps changing, I think, how this narrative is going to work out, where he is going to land in all of this. I mean, Alec Baldwin was the person holding the gun that killed Helena Hutchins. And this interview felt so much like he is playing his own lawyer, like he had the confidence that he could play his own lawyer. And he's trying to create a force field around himself of semantics and tears. He comes across as so arrogant in this interview. And I'm going to go through. I watched it once this morning before going on a show, the Jordi Collada show, which you should subscribe to on YouTube. But I listened to it the second time and just wrote down like a bunch of the quotes of what he was saying, because just so much of the stuff, it seems like he's just so unaware of how this stuff is playing out. And a lot of lawyers, I've been saying, this only came out, it hasn't even been out 24 hours, so there's still a lot of responses that are coming from it. But a lot of lawyers are saying that these comments more than likely are really hurting him. This is I'll talk about the movie that I reviewed today, but this is going to be the story for today. There are still a few other things, but if you don't like the Alec Baldwin story that's going on, I'm sorry. This is the movie story. This is the biggest story really that's dominating Hollywood. And what the narrative is keeps shifting. Alec Baldwin keeps shifting it because he won't shut the hell up. Okay, from the very beginning, what he says from the very start, which I feel is hilarious watching the whole thing back a second time. He says this again and again. I don't want to sound like a victim. I don't want to sound like a victim. He always says that. He always says, I don't want to sound like a victim because we actually have two victims. But as you will see throughout this entire narrative, he always makes himself sound like the victim. I mean, he's the one going on the show for an entire hour. Okay. So he follows that up with another statement that is just, he says, we had something profound in common, Helena and I. We both assumed that the gun was empty. Now, first of all, the level of disrespect in that, especially since this woman died by his own hand accidentally. I'm just going to say that accidentally. To say that you have a profound similarity and that it was that you both assumed the gun was empty just makes you sound like you are a victim tied in with this woman who died. That is incredibly disrespectful. And I'm just going to also say everything I'm going through this in terms of how everything he's saying, I think, is shifting the narrative. I'm not saying how any of this would play out in court because I have no idea how anything would play out in court. I don't know how that works. But for him to say that the profound connection that he shared with this woman that he shot was that they both assumed the gun was empty is so terrible, especially since I can't think of why she would be responsible for asking if that gun was empty. And I can think of thousands of reasons as to why he should have done so. So yes, you might have both shared that assumption, but that profoundly changes his circumstance in this fight, I guess, is the way that he's saying this. He then goes on to say that I am a purely creative producer, only casting and script. Leanna Yes, he does. He feels a lot like the 30 Rock character in that interview, totally unaware of what's going on, very big-headed. There's a few statements that if this situation was not so tragic, sound purely like a comedy. He says, "I'm a purely creative director, only casting and script," which is fair to a degree. And a lot of these statements, I think, are fair if you're going to abdicate, if you're going to admit that you have some responsibility. Okay, yes, you're only casting and script, but and it comes up later, and I think ABC, the interviewer, did not push him on this enough at all. If you're on this set though, and you're a producer, I don't think it matters if you're only casting in script. Don't you have a level of responsibility whenever you see that people are walking off? Don't Aren't you supposed to ask what's going on there? I don't think they pushed enough on that, but it does come up. He then after that cries whenever he says she was admired by everyone that worked with her. He starts crying about that. And I don't know. I just can't. One person said if Alec Baldwin wasn't such a good actor, I would believe every bit of this performance. But I've got to say, I don't. The crying feels very. He doesn't cry at throughout this. I'll mention it. He doesn't cry at moments that really mention when he would have done something that resulted in killing her, but he does cry whenever he is saying that people remember her well, which seems a little bit strange. He's always very ready with something to say whenever it comes to say something very confidently and straight face when it comes to what's your responsibility? What did you do that caused this? Because you clearly caused a large part of this. Although no question is that direct. Stephanopoulos would never have a question that direct. So he then goes on to say he was told to only give the gun to the armor and the assistant director. That's the protocol of the business, and the whole protocol discussion comes up later on. He then goes on to say that he got no complaints from her or from the prop department that anything was going wrong, that there were no safety concerns. He in fact says that he was going to, because there was a safety concern, but also a lot of the people on the set were saying that with the kind of the IATSE strike that was going on, they were saying that their hotel rooms were way too far away from set, way, way, way too far away, that they were having to travel a long distance. Everyone was exhausted. So Alec Baldwin said that's the only thing that he heard about from anyone on the set, that there was a problem with hotel rooms being too far. So he then says, I was going to offer to pay for the Airbnb for people to be close to the set, which I thought was very, kind of like, he says, I do this all the time. I go into my own salary and pay for people to be able to have a better experience on the set, which is, very convenient to make him seem like just a great, chip off the old block. But then he says that the next day, no one was there. He says they were all gone the very next day. So he was unable to actually pay for anyone's stuff. He was also, and that's what they didn't press him on this. He says the very next day they were gone. But did he not ask people why they left? Did he not ask, so I hear that we're hiring an entire new crew. Where did everyone go? Did people literally just tell him, oh, they wanted closer hotel rooms, and that's the only reason? There's no concern with the firearms. Like, they did not push him at all asking if he knew that people left because of the firearms. Because if so, then yeah, that's a huge amount of responsibility. But hey, it's Alec Baldwin. We don't need to ask him those questions. So they move right along. They say he then goes on to talk about his love of making movies and how I really thought this part was disgusting. He says that he was sitting in one of the pews in the church and he said, this movie I realized was making me love movies again. And this is when a time that he cries again. He cries recounting being able to work with actors like Anthony Hopkins and Meryl Streep in his younger years. He starts crying at that moment, thinking back on his own career. I really can't believe that he even thought that that was a good idea to cry for it. And I am saying that to a degree, I think the crying was slightly staged. So then he goes on to talking about what happened with the gun. He said, quote, I let go of the hammer and the gun goes off. And then they get very intense with the music here. And Alec Baldwin goes like, bang. And then the gun goes off. And he's like, oh, but the gun but you didn't pull the trigger, right? He says, I never pulled the trigger. I never would. I've been told that damages the firing mechanism. Which even still, I don't know why you would make that comment. If you were to say, why would I pull a trigger whenever pointing the gun at someone? I feel like you would say, because you never know what the situation is like and you want to be as safe as possible. No, instead, he says, you don't damage the fire. That would damage the fire mechanism. That's what I've been told. He then says, the idea that there was a live round didn't enter into my mind until 45 minutes after the shot. So here's where he really starts getting into more of like what was actually happening at that time. Again, the quote, the idea that there was a live round didn't enter into my mind until 45 minutes after the shot. Now, I imagine at that time there was a whole lot of shock going on. But again, ABC, the interviewer, didn't push him even a little bit. I would be understanding of the shock that was going into that moment. It feels a bit strange, though, that I don't know that he would not think the fact that it took so long for him to think that there was a possibility of a bullet being in that gun after a shot had gone off and someone had been carried away that was bleeding all over the place. I think that does point to the stupidity that he is working on, because he didn't even think, he didn't have a level of urgency before he held the gun to check it. And I feel like if you're going to have a level of urgency when you get a gun, it's going to be because you know that it's possible that there is going to be a live round in that gun. So for someone to say after a huge accident's happened, it took 45 minutes for me to even think there could have been a bullet in that gun. No, the moment you're handed a gun, you assume that there is a bullet in that gun. Again, I'm not a gun expert, but look, I am also not someone who's around guns a lot. So I feel like you still know, though, that you have to have a level of caution whenever you operate a gun. And a prop gun, also remember, is the exact same thing as a gun. Baldwin then said nobody had any idea that there was a bullet till the cops said that there was a bullet in the gun, which is, fair. You don't know until you know. And then he said, the agony sets in on thinking that someone put a live bullet in that gun. And this is where Alec Baldwin really starts playing his lawyer magic in making it so that every question that comes up that starts ebbing closer to him having to speak about his own responsibility, he will just shift that straight to saying we need to focus in on who in the world put that live bullet in the gun. And it comes up one time later, his own responsibility, and he really mucks up that answer. He then goes on to say that he told the husband that he's completely sorry. ABC then comes out in like a voiceover saying there was a torrent of criticism. This is when the torrent of criticism was coming out at Alec Baldwin. And the way that they say that, even in the voiceover, like assumes a level of, why would people be criticizing? It was a surprise that there was such a level of criticism lobbed at this man that shot a woman who then died. They have a clip from MSNBC where one of the hosts say, when you pick up that gun, you make sure that it's never pointed at anyone. It then cuts to Rachel Morrison, who's an incredibly respected cinematographer, actually from Louisiana, really, really great cinematographer, Oscar nominated. She says in a news interview, you should know being told that there is a cold gun is not the same thing as being shown an empty gun and showing it to the entire crew. And then they do have a clip from Fox News where a woman says, if I was handed a gun, I would have checked it, wouldn't you? And then it cuts to Baldwin, whose response to that is, people tell me, you idiot, you never point the gun at anyone. And then he says, well, you don't unless you are handed a gun, being told that it's empty, and are then instructed to point it towards the DP by the DP when practicing a shot. Now, this seems to be the defense that's going to be used again and again and again whenever all of this, trial stuff starts becoming a lot more official. I'll read that again, because I really think this is the thing that he's going to try and live on. People tell me, you idiot, you never point the gun at anyone. Well, you don't unless you are handed a gun, being told it is empty, and are then instructed to point it towards the DP by the DP when practicing a shot. I really think that is straw manning what the actual problem is. I don't think there is a problem with pointing the gun at the DP. I don't think there's a problem really even with pulling the trigger. That happens all the time on a movie set. Watch a behind the scenes video of any Christopher Nolan movie. They do that all the time. The problem is that he didn't check the gun at all. And it seemed like there weren't even supposed to be blanks in that gun from the way he talks about this. So even seeing that there were blanks should have ruled some type of caution in his mind, but he didn't check the gun. And tons of people say that they checked the gun. I think and I feel like we're going to hear this line a lot more. And what I'm at least going to think whenever I hear hey, I was told the gun was empty, and so I was then told to point the gun, and then the gun went off. That's all that happened. There's nothing wrong in doing that. I feel like that is it's a false equivalency. That's not even what happened. Actually, that wouldn't be a false equivalency. I just feel like he is misdirecting what the issue is, which is, why didn't you check the gun? Forget the fact that you were to point it somewhere. That is fine. Why didn't you check the gun? So then he keeps saying this. He keeps saying, he said the same thing. We both had the same thing in common, her and I. We both thought that it was empty. Again, main difference, she was not responsible for checking the gun. You were responsible for checking the gun. Again, I'm sorry. That's just, that's a stickler. I can't believe that doesn't come up more. It's just such problematic framing. And then he says, yeah, oh, that's right. He ends off this section with this. He says, that checking the gun, I mean, is not her responsibility. That isn't my responsibility. Whose responsibility is it remains to be seen. And that is why he keeps tying himself to Helena with this whole, oh, the assumption. There's we both had a profound connection, and we both assumed that the thing was empty, and that's proof that he's trying to actively tie himself to the victim to then say, who would have put the bullet in the gun? Whoever that is, they're the person that has all the responsibility. Then this whole new section they get into says, sometimes the prop guy would insist on demonstrating to you and the camera that the gun is empty. He said that that would be something that the armor would do every now and then. He says sometimes that would happen, but not all times. Some would demonstrate, some would insist on demonstrating that they would demonstrate for everyone. Those that didn't, I would trust that they are doing their job. Remember, I've done movies where I am pointing guns at people and they are being pointed at me. I've been in films where guns are fired at me and I've trusted them to do their jobs. Now, this, I think, again, points to Baldwin having just such a huge level of stupidity that he's working on here. Like, he sounds like such an idiot. That I feel like that's the best that you could say for him, and that he's placed himself in a situation of extreme negligence, just such extreme negligence to not check that gun and to say that he's totally relying, like he is nothing more than a vessel here, being handed props, being handed everything. And when you're handed a gun, he's pretty much the groundwork for anyone watching this to say, why would I check a gun? Why would an actor check a gun? That makes no sense. And the George Clooney thing comes out soon. I'm happy that George Clooney spoke out about that. But before that, he says, I would do anything in my power to bring them back. And then he cries again. He then says, I am all for doing something that will take us to a place that will make this less likely to happen again. And then Stephanopoulos brings up the Clooney thing. He says, the quote from Clooney is, every single time that I'm handed a gun on set, again, this is Clooney. Every single time I'm handed a gun on set, Mark, they hand me a gun. I look at it. I open it. I show it to the person I'm pointing it at. Every single person on the crew, every single take, you hand it back to the armorer. When you're done, you do it again. Everyone does it. Everyone knows it. Now, Baldwin and Clooney, both very seasoned, respected actors. So George Stephanopoulos then says, what do you say to actors who say that when they are handed a gun, they check it themselves? Now, I think this is really the main question that he needs to be asked. And his response is, this is ridiculous. He says, he starts off by saying, well, there were a lot of people who felt it necessary to comment on the situation, and that didn't help the situation. Which, first of all, what the shit? Like, what does that mean it doesn't help the situation? I feel like you would have to be so egocentrical and so arrogant to say that someone else commenting on the situation where this woman died is not helping the situation, because he is the person that shot the gun. Whenever you say, hey, George Clooney, thanks, but you commenting isn't helping the situation. It's helping the situation to give people context as to how the industry deals with these types of weapons. And if that makes it seem like Alec Baldwin might have done something wrong, then yeah, you're probably going to say that that's not helping the situation. But I feel like that is just an example of being very pig-headed. That is, I think, probably one of the main examples showing that he is very pig-headed in this entire situation. But then this is where he brings it home on this issue. He says, you have your protocol and you check your gun. Well, that's good for you. Someone told me when I was young that we don't want the actor to be the last line of defense against a catastrophic event with a gun. And the more that I've thought about this and kind of heard the more experts talking about whether it's gun safety or talking about what they do as actors, I think that there is an assumption going around in how people talk about this that seems to be that is the actor the last line of defense or not? And I feel like whether or not you want to say how the protocol should be, the reality that this situation proves is that the actor is the last line of defense. If you are handed a weapon, and you're Alec Baldwin, and it is loaded, you are the last line of defense. It, in a way, does not matter if someone put a live bullet in that gun, hoping that you were going to end up shooting someone. If you check the gun, like George Clooney says all actors know to do, then none of this happens. None of this happens at all. But for him to say, you have your protocol and you check the gun, well, good for you. I think there's a way that Alec Baldwin could be talking like this. He could be a little bit more remorseful whenever he talks about this. But that moment in the interview, that pissed me off so much. No, there's not, oh, you have your protocol and that's to check a gun. But, if that's what you want to do, then good for you. Well, if you had done that, then this woman would still be alive. I can't I can't believe that the interviewer didn't push him more on that. The only thing that he asks him after that is, what is the actor's responsibility? He didn't. He just said, hey, what's the actor's responsibility? And here, it's a little bit long, but here, I'll go through this twice. This is what Alec Baldwin says to this. I guess that is a tough question because the actor's response, and also whenever I go through this, see how the way that he answers this question, you can see him almost recenter the way that he thinks about this issue as him, as the centerpiece to how we should be looking at everything. I guess that is a tough question because the actor's responsibility going this day forward is very different than it was the day before that. Yeah. Now I can't imagine that I would ever do a movie that had a gun in it again. I can. When you say, what is the actor's responsibility? The responsibility is to do what the prop or armorer tells them that you need to do. And we did not have a problem. I mean, I understand that there was an accidental discharge on the set with a blank round, but we did not have a problem with me until that day. Everything gets slowed down. And the music gets all intense. He's like, everything gets slowed down. A Zapruder film-esque, meaning the footage that captured JFK getting shot. And the issue with that is there is only one question to be resolved here, and that is this. Where did the live round come from? I'm going to go back through this because there's a lot in that statement, and I think there's a lot in that statement that puts, again, I'm not saying legally. There's a lot in that statement that really makes you just look at Alec Baldwin and think, what the heck is going on in your head, man? Like, you are so out of touch. So I guess that is a tough question because the actor's responsibility going this day forward is very different than it was in the days before that. Yeah. Now I can't imagine that I would even do a movie that had a gun in it again. The arrogance there is outstanding. First of all, you've been quoting to Baldwin people in the industry saying, dude, this is not how you act. You know that this is not how you act. You check the gun, you make sure that it's safe. And so they put him, all of the people saying that throughout the industry, and he goes, that's not what I was told. That's not what I was told at all. And then he says, but from now on, clearly that is how we should do it. So totally abdicating any sense of responsibility in that moment himself, but instead saying, well, because it happened this way, yeah, now this should be the way that it is, from now on, because this happened with me. It just infuriating way to behave. And then after that, he says, what is the actor's responsibility is to do exactly what the armorer and the prop person tells you to do, which again, you can just see him planting that seed in there, poisoning that well to say, hey, everyone else on set, they're the ones that, are in charge of things. I'm in charge of nothing. I just collect the money whenever the movie comes out because that's all I do as a producer. And then he goes on to say that they didn't have a problem with him. But then he says, I am to understand that there was an accidental discharge on the set before that. And that's the thing that I'm pissed off that no one was asking him about. No one was asking him, when did you find out about that? You just stated that you knew that there was a problem with a blank going off with one of the guns before. When did you find out about that? Because you found out about that before you actually shot someone. Then, yeah, as a producer, I would say you hold a lot of responsibility. But then he just goes on to say, where did the live round come from? Where did the live round come from? So he says, how the bullet got on that set, that is for the criminal investigation to solve, not me. And when he says this because the guy interviewing him, George Stephanopoulos, goes, how did the gun get on that set? He interrupts him and he waves his hand and he's like, no, that's not for me to say. That's not for me to say at all. I couldn't say that. There's a criminal investigation going on, which this line really, really pissed me off, especially going forward. He goes, no, I can't speak on that. I could never speak on that because there's a criminal investigation going on. And then the very next thing that he says, it is very unlikely that I'm going to be charged. Speaking directly about what's going on with this criminal investigation, he negates so many things that he says, and then he starts to actually shift how people should be focusing on the investigation. But oh no, I could never comment on how a bullet got on set. That'd be inappropriate. So he starts bringing on I'm sorry, this is not Alec Baldwin. They then bring on footage of the attorney of the armorer on, and he talks about saying that he thinks that there could be sabotage going on. Baldwin then says he doesn't think there's any sabotage going on. He actually says that's an enormous swing, and then he questions, if it is sabotage, then it's to harm who? What's the motive? He says it's very unlikely, but he thinks that it's an accident, and that sabotage is nothing more than a distraction. And I think that is very much the way that they're going to try to keep this going. They're going to keep trying to say, at least in Baldwin's court, they're going to keep trying to say, hey, there was no sabotage, because if there was sabotage, then that means that the production team is highly negligible. It was just an accident. Accidents happen all the time. Oh, and by the way, It was an accident that I, Alec Baldwin, had absolutely no responsibility in causing. So he has to then go on to say, well, how in the world did this happen? And this is when we start talking about the armorer and the assistant director. He says, I don't want to see anyone suffer unnecessarily. I hope that they, meaning the investigators, follow this to the end of the earth. Where did that bullet come from? If that bullet did not come on the property, none of this would have happened. And it's like, dude, do you not hear how many connections of logic you're missing here? Because yes, you're correct. If that live bullet was not on set, then none of this would have happened. You want to know another reason that none of this would happen? If you had opened the damn chamber and seen that there were bullets in a gun when there weren't supposed to be bullets in a gun. Like we're going to apply very basic levels of logic to every side of this, unless it's my part, and then we're not going to talk about it at all. Why would we talk about the stuff that has to do with me? That doesn't really. I'm Alec Baldwin. I'm on ABC right now. So he says we have to focus on why the bullet was there. What was the reason for the bullet being there? And then this is where, remember, he has just said, I don't want to see anyone suffer unnecessarily. And he wants them to figure out why the bullet's there. And then he goes to the armorer and the assistant director and says, at the same time, I don't want that the armorer and the assistant director suffer for the agony of having to face for what they're responsible for the things that they did. So it's a total, that statement is pretty much saying, I care for these two people that caused this entire thing to happen, and I hope that they don't have to suffer for it. Like, well, dude, where do you fall into place there? Like, where? And it's still, it pisses me off that the interviewer still, I know I keep saying this, the interviewer did not push him on any of this at all. And then in a very weird segment that honestly, even as an editor, I cannot believe that it did not cut this out. He then goes on to talk about how Donald Trump is hurting him because Donald Trump said that he thinks Baldwin did it intentionally. And I feel like that's just a way to kind of money. I feel like that's almost like a wild card. Like maybe if you throw something like that in there, then maybe you'll get sympathy. And then he starts going on about the suits that are happening. He says, why did people not wait to file all of these lawsuits? Like some people tried to get lawsuits in early, so we shouldn't trust them. Then let's see, is there anything else? One of the lawsuits says that Mr. Baldwin chose to play Russian roulette with a loaded gun without checking it and without having the armorer do so. So he reads that part of a lawsuit to him saying they're saying that you did not check something that you should have checked. So what do you say to that? And he then says that someone came up to me after this happened. They put their hand on my shoulder and they said, you are not responsible for this at all. That is what they told me. And then he says, who told you that? Who was the person that told, which person that's filing the lawsuit told you that? And then he says, no comment, but it was one of those two. So pretty much, hey, don't trust either of those lawsuits that's going on, but especially not that one. It could have been that one. And yeah, then later on, the ABC announcer says that, yeah, no, it was a friend of hers that was on the set that was next to her that was holding her while she was dying. And he did think at the moment that it wasn't her fault. And then when more information came out, it did. But Alec Baldwin spends so much time throwing these lawsuits under the bus, making it seem like everything before and after that's happening is targeting him. Like it's he's saying, hey, I'm not the victim here. I'm more like I'm the victim of trying to be the scapegoat is pretty much what he's saying. I didn't die, but I'm the victim of trying to be a scapegoat. And then the announcer says, it was so funny because he keeps saying this. He keeps saying that he's not a victim. And then the announcer says, Alec's life has been a nightmare since all of this happened. And this part is, I think, a little bit awesome. I really hope this one lives on. So Alec Baldwin says bluntly, like so bluntly, I couldn't give a shit about my career anymore. And the George Stephanopoulos looks shocked. He asks, is it over? Alec Baldwin then responds, it could be if I decided to. Could I work? I've got a movie coming up in January. I asked if they wanted me to not show up because of what happened, and they said no. But I said to myself, do I want to work again? So yeah, of course, I don't care if my career is over, but guess what? That's going to be up to me. In fact, I've got a movie in January. So yeah, I'll probably still be working. That's all I'll go through with this. The point of going through this really is that I've been seeing a lot of articles. They just kind of take bits and snippets. It seems like there are people that want for nothing to go beyond the story of this is just an accident. It was an accident and it's done. And that I feel is very annoying because whenever you actually start reading these articles, you start seeing more stuff come out. You start seeing things that Alec Baldwin says. And let me make this clear in terms of where I'm coming from. I don't think that it was sabotage from what is being said. I also don't think that anyone intentionally killed Helena Hutchins. It does seem like it's an accident. But what is very upsetting here is that there clearly is a level of responsibility that everyone in this situation has to face up to. The assistant director has said he did not check the gun well enough. The armorer has said that she has a level of responsibility in this. Alec Baldwin, throughout this entire thing, is being very clear that not only are other people responsible, he is very, very distinctly not responsible in any way, shape, or form, which just feels very slightly disgusting. And I get that, look, these people are very rich, celebrities. I feel like we all know that they're not, great people. You never, but it also doesn't really matter. They can mess up their own lives. Who really cares? But someone is dead, and it is very annoying to see Alec Baldwin do what is essentially it feels like he's just trying to poison the well in this to say, hey, doesn't really matter what I've done. It's okay. Like, it's perfectly fine. Hi, bye for the Hobbit. But I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy seeing any of this stuff at all. It feels very nasty. And I do also think that this is probably not going to end well for him. I was talking last week about it, and I said that I think that if he plays his cards right, then he might actually be okay, because it does seem like it's an accident. But the more that he keeps going in on this, I have no responsibility at all. I really think he is going to get himself in a lot of trouble, and I'm not going to enjoy watching anything that he does anymore, because it's just nasty. And it resulted in someone dying. Like, if he really gets off with no responsibility, having no consequences, and he doesn't abdicate, he keeps abdicating all his responsibilities. It's funny because arrogant people are a bit fun because they think that they can do everything. He thinks he can be his own lawyer. And it's a little bit of a comfort to know that they're always going to end up driving their car whenever it crashes and burns. And I think that Baldwin would have his best chances if he just shut up and sat down, or fell on his sword and then shut up and sat down. And honestly, I doubt that his lawyers even wanted him to do this, because like, this performance felt so pig-headed throughout the entire thing. Hardly even made sense. Was hardly consistent at all. And that's all I'll say. I'll end there this week. I've been talking a lot. Thank you all for listening to this. It was a lot, but he said a lot of weird shit in there. So just kind of wanted to go through it and kind of feel like you had standing on what it is being said and kind of what they're setting up, because I think this trial is going to be pretty big. But today on the channel, the review is Gremlins. It's going to be the first of 4 or 5 Christmas movies that I'm going to do reviews for. Go ahead and check that out. Let me know what you think of Gremlins. It's one of the few holiday horror comedies, and it pulls it off very well. But also go there and leave ideas for other holiday horror comedies, because I don't know of that many. I could probably only name 4. But it's a fun genre whenever it's done correctly. And Gremlins is perfect. Perfect Christmas movie, perfect horror movie, perfect comedy. But thank you guys for watching, as always. And if you are not subscribed, please do so on YouTube for future updates on reviews and movie news.